Hello everyone. In this video we're going to go over two important concepts that allows us to really enhance our ability to work with and program web pages in JavaScript, and that would be the BOM and the DOM, which is the BOM is BOM or Browser Object Model, and the DOM is the Document Object Model. Now, we're going to, of course, be working within the Visual Studio Code environment and showing how to manipulate both of these objects in the environment. And so now what the BOM is all about, or the Browser Object Model, it's a set of objects that represent the browser and all of its features. What we can do within the BOM is we can open and close windows, resize windows, handle events like mouse movements and key presses, and we can even report on Windows settings like the URL, the size of the window, the mouse position, things like that. There are actually a number of different object models that the browser object model is composed of, and we have the window object, the screen object, the location object, the history object, and the navigator object. Now let's look at some of the things we can do with this. Now I have some simple code here that we're going to work with, and we can also work within the watch window over here. And so if I want to do something with the window object, I can just come in here, type window, and then I need to manipulate that in some way, shape, or form. So probably one of the things you might be familiar with, though, is the alert. And it's a nice way to pop up a message of some kind. And if we run that, again, I've got Visual Studio Code set up to automatically open Chrome for me, which is very convenient. And there is our alert message popping up. Now, of course, note that I can also come in here and just stop, use the debugger and set a breakpoint over here to stop at any particular place. And so now if I restart that, now we've stopped the execution of the JavaScript code. Of course, JavaScript is anything that's going to be inside of these script elements. And the only other element I have on the page is an unordered list. And so note what we have over here. I'd already set up window to be viewable, the window object to be viewable in the watch. And there's all sorts of functions and attributes that are associated with the window object. A useful thing to do here is if you're searching for something specific, so maybe I want to look for the alert, I can just type inside this window a alert, and that's going to filter out all of the items in this list because there can be quite a few. Now, what's kind of odd about the way the search works is that it actually looks for, on each line, it looks for each one of those characters. So we're looking for, so when it's highlighting each one of those characters, it's not just searching for the word alert. Now also we can come up here and click on this as a filter, and this allows us to enable or disable this as a filter. So if I enable the filter, it's going to remove any of those objects that don't show up, that don't match our search in this particular case. Again, it's just a nice convenient way to allow you to reduce the amount of code. Now, so you note there when I turned that off that the Since these guys didn't have the A, L, E, R, and T in them, they didn't show up. But here is our alert function and some information about that. Now, some of the other things, and of course, we can also do. We can open up windows with this with the open command. You can just come in here, filter, and this one isn't going to. This is going to be a little bit harder to find. Oh, sorry, turn on the filter, and here is all of those items that correspond with that. And here's the open function. So that would allow us to create a brand new window. And of course, the other thing that the browser object model allows us to see are some of the attributes. So let's look at. If I click on the X, it just completely removes that that filter that I've typed in there. But let's look for something else. Let's look for inner height. And there that is. So in this particular case, the current inner height is set to, and the inner height refers to the height of the window, 640. And if we can also come in and look for, clear that out, type in inner width. So note that I've got this reduced, so in order to see everything we have to open that back up. And the only one that matches that is, inner width here is 451, and that, again, that would be the width of the browser window that I have over there open on the right. Also notice over on the right we have this is paused, and you can, this is indicates to us that we are kind of stopped in the debugger. And we can, of course, continue that execution, but this allows us to debug, and of course, there's another feature that we're actually able to use. If I expand this window out. Okay, so if we want to locate that again, normally it would be open in here by default. We can say View. And we can say Open View and go to the Debug Console. And what's nice about the Debug Console is it allows us to try things out. Since JavaScript's an interpreted language, this Debug Console down here allows us to type in whatever commands we want, and they will be displayed as part of our browser. So I just typed my own alert here, and that was displayed. And just to show you that it is actually different, I'll create a different one. So it says "Hello You," that gets displayed. So anything you want to allows you to experiment very easily down here in this window. So that comes in handy if you're trying to try things out, or that way you don't have to go through the whole process of changing the program, executing, changing, executing it. You can just come down here and try various things out. If you want to clear out the contents of this window, you can just click here. Now, and like I said, the bomb attributes represent the current state of that window. And now there's another object we have is screen. So we can do screen dot, and of course this allows us to look up the different possibilities. But in this case, I'm just interested in width. And if I hit enter, it says 1280. Now this screen object reflects the actual entire screen that I'm currently in. So I can get the width and the height that way. So you can tell that obviously my screen height and width is width is 1280, height is 720. Also, there's available width and available height, which takes into if you have a taskbar, it takes that into account as well. So those are very handy. Also, we have the note too that you don't actually have to put window in front of it. It'll still work with just screen. Now, also we can look at the location object. The location gives us information about the URL on the current page or the path name. Everything related to what you have typed. So this information up here is what the location is concerned with. So now I can go look up those values. So I could either type them in here, or I could go into Window. I'm going to clear out my filter and replace it with another one. So location. Oops. So I want location. And the lowercase one, it indicates the attribute. So I can come in here and see what these particular values are. And we can see that there's href, which reflects what's up here in this window. Or like we said, we can come down here and say location dot, and let's instead refer to the protocol. In this particular case, since we're just working locally, normally you would have an HTTP or HTTPS for the protocol here, but in this case I'm working straight off of a file. So the protocol in this case is file, and that's reflected right here. And of course there's other things you can do with that. You can get the path name, you can do and of course note again that you do not have to put the window prefix or the window object in front of that. And of course we have a number of different, the port, if you're using a different port, it'll tell you what the port is, path name, all sorts of good information like that. So here's our path name in this particular case. Also, another thing you can do with this too is if the assign, there's also a window history object that allows us to see, allows us to manipulate the browser, the back and forth. It works with the browser history, whatever page you were on previously. So by going with a history back, it'll actually allow you to roll back to the previous page. Or we can also do forward, which is same as clicking the browser, the forward button. Again, do not need to have the window prefix in order to use this, or to use these commands. If you want to find out information about the browser, one of the ways to do that is simply to, let's restart this. There is another object which is called the Navigator. In fact, instead of searching through it this time, let's clear this out, add a new, and just say Navigator. So there's the Navigator contains information about the browser itself. It has some code names, the code name, and the name of the company that created it, the language that you're currently in, the type of keyboard, various capabilities. Now note that these names aren't always very straightforward. I'm actually on Windows, on a 64-bit Windows, but it's showing my platform in this case as Win32. And the product in this case is I'm running Chrome, and it's showing Gecko as the product name. and up here is the app version. Actually shows a number of different browser names, so it isn't necessarily as straightforward as you might think in order to use this information. But it does allow you to determine exactly what browser the user is currently using on that page, and that's very valuable if you're trying to do some custom things or do some advanced functions that may not be available on all browsers. I've said before that the HTML is the most non-standard standard in the computer industry. No one browser actually follows all of the standards what are actually required, but some are better than others. Now let's move on to the document object model, or DOM it's referred to as. The BOM, of course, was the data structure that referred to the browser itself. This is the document or the web page that we're working with. And so when you load a web page from a web server, that HTML is loaded into this document object model data structure. And by using JavaScript, we can actually manipulate any part of that page using DOM-related code. And the thing is, I actually do mean absolutely anything. We can modify the entire page. We can swap it completely out, replace it with something else. Or we can be more surgical about it and modify individual elements. Of course, this is what gives us our interactive web pages and allows us to play browser-based games and so forth. So I threatened the ability to replace the entire page. So let's do that. So I'm going to take out my alert window here, and we're going to use the document object model starts with document. So this particular, this is a little hard to see, but what we're doing is we're taking the document, and then the document element that refers to the main page document, and the inner HTML. Well, that is the HTML that makes up the page. And what I've done is, so I'm referring to the main part of the page, and I'm saying let's replace the HTML code that currently exists with this new one. Now, let's just let this execute. Now, okay, notice what happened. We actually had we started out with coffee, tea, and milk. Here, I can do that one more time. So this is the HTML as part of the page, but I stopped it here at the JavaScript. And then I said, okay, let's replace all of the HTML. And I go past that, suddenly I have an entirely new page. So now if I go in here, what's a little bit tricky about this, if we let this complete, I go in here and I say view page source. What's interesting is that we have the original HTML that makes up the page, which is what we see over here, but that has actually been swapped out. So the question is, how do we see that? So let's close this. And the way you do that in Chrome is to right-click on one of the items and do an inspect. And so by inspecting that particular item, we can see that the HTML is not what we started out with originally. I've done exactly what I said we could do, is completely replace that entire page, and so this was our original HTML, and this is what we have now. Now, of course, that is a little bit extreme. Let's close that. But we might want to manipulate individual elements as well. And of course, just like with our other object model, we can work down here in the Debug Console. We can look up things in the watch. Let's replace this with document. And so once we, again, note that it's not available until we actually stop the debugger. So we execute that code, and now the watch, since we've stopped inside JavaScript, we can go in and look at all these different elements that make up the document object model, which is everything on our web page. And right here we have all, which shows us that we have some HTML, we have a head, we have body, and we can go in individually and look at all of those values. In fact, you can see the fact that this corresponds. We have HTML, we have no title, then we have a head, it's just empty, then we have body. The body contains unordered list, and here are our list elements, and we can kind of drill down into those and find out what values there are. So the inner HTML, inner text value for that first list item is coffee. So of course, not only can we look up what an individual item is, we can individually change them. One of the most common ways to do that is to use the document get element by ID. Now, usually so this particular element, our list structure, is made up of a number of different items, but we have noted it, we've given it an ID of serve here. So the ID in this case is serve. So if I want to address that, I can simply say document dot, and then there's a function that allows us to go find that element based on its ID number, which is get element by ID. And then we simply have to, in parentheses and quotes, put the name of that ID. And so that now refers to the data structure that contains that unordered list. So what we're going to want to do then, we can of course assign that to a particular element, or we can make changes to it. Now, one of the things we can do here is make some more space here. I could go in and I could say modify any aspect of that, but let's say we would like to change the style. So I can say style, and of course we can use any of our CSS inline. In this case, we can do color is going to be red. So we have our getting the element serve. We're getting the element by ID, which is called serve, and in this case, the unordered list is serve, which contains coffee, tea, and milk. And we're saying, hey, let's change the color of that text. So let's restart this, and we'll see that as soon as that is executed, it changes the color for us. As I said, we can come down here, and again, as long as we're stopped in the debugger, I can play around with this. Let's say color. Color is going to be blue. And you see immediately that changes. We can change it to any particular color we would like. But again, that is very handy for making changes to individual elements and trying out different techniques to make sure that you have everything correct. Now, of course, I can address some individual elements and make changes to those. So I could say add a paragraph here, and that's demo, and I could put some text in here. Just put paragraph. Now, if I wanted to manipulate that, get element by ID, instead we'll use demo in this particular case, but instead of modifying the color, which of course we can do, we can change the HTML that is contained within that particular element. So we can do that. We'll see that. Let's restart this. So we start off with coffee, tea, and milk, and of course, and para. Stop right before we execute this code, and that's going to go in and change the inner text, the inner HTML associated with that particular item. So that's a great way to dynamically change the values of elements as the page is executing. So as we show, we can do the entire page. We can do you could replace the body. You could replace what's inside of a particular list. So I'd like to add an item to the, let's get rid of this paragraph. I want to add another item to my unordered list here. So what we can do, well, I still need to address that particular item. So again, we'll use getElementById. But now what we really need to be able to do is to get the individual node inside of that list. So the way I would do that, in this case we're actually referring to the overall item, and if I want to add a new item to that list, say use a function that creates a new item. So we're saying document.createElement, and the element I want to create is a list element. So that item has been created, but I haven't put it anywhere. So I need to attach it to the existing structure there. So the way that we do that is that structure is addressed by the EL variable here. So the list element has been assigned to the EL, so now I'm going to use that variable to append a new value, a new child item, which happens to be that list element that I just created. So new item. If I were to execute this, we will see that I have created a new child item, which has been added to the very end. That's what append does, adds it to the end. There's other functions that allow you to add it anywhere you would like. But the only thing I'm missing is some text here. So what I need to do is attach a child to that, a child text item, or text node is what we call it, to that particular list element, and we do that with this command. So that's document.create. We're creating a text node. The text happens to be water in this case, and we're going to assign that to a variable. Again, could be called anything, called text node in this case. And so now what I need to do is to attach that to my previous, the element that I created, this new item. So let's copy that, and we simply say append child. But now the thing I'm trying to append is text node. And my IDE has completed these, figures out that that's a possibility, and gives me the ability to simply select that, and guarantees that it's been typed in correctly. And let's restart this. So we'll see if we execute all of this code that we have now added another list item to the unordered list. So of course we can create HTML, we can create elements, and we can also remove them as well. I really just want to get rid of this ordered list. Don't really need it in the way. Well, this EL, our element, has already addressed that. So what if I try EL dot, and we'll say remove. So do we want to remove? We can remove an attribute, or we can remove a child new item. Whether we're removing a child from a specific we're removing it from the list itself. So remove the last. Now, not only we can use get element by ID, but we can also use get element by tag name. So it allows us to address an individual tag, such as, so in that case, and by tag we're referring to one of these, so we could specify, say, UL, or we could specify LI or body or any of those. In fact, let's do that. Let's specify body. Execute that code. This EL has been set to that to body in that particular case, and I can add that. Let's clear this out. We'll watch the EL. So as we can see, this is the HTML collection of body, which contains all the HTML associated with that particular element, and we can manipulate that at will. And we can also do that by, we can also do get element by class name as well. That's another option. So specify if you're using classes for your individual elements for CSS, you can address it by class name as well. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of different ways to address items in the DOM, and also allows you to manipulate it. Now I want to do kind of one last thing here. So we have in this case a, let's look at our let's put this back. We're going to say, let's get the element serve again. And this will allow us to work again with that list. So I showed you changing the style, but of course we can do other interesting things like we can change the scale as well. So simply by using a transform function, which in this case I'm just scaling it down to 90% of what it was, and we'll see that that's exactly what happens. And again, capability to come down here and do further manipulations is kind of nice. I can make it so this actually is scale X and Y. So simply enter, and I've scaled it incredibly small. You can't even see it now. I can put that back. I can also scale things up. So a lot of flexibility there. Pretty much anything you can do in CSS, you can manipulate dynamically in JavaScript using the DOM.